Terrors of the Night is a solo and or cooperative fantasy adventure published by Dark City Games. If you know this publisher, and I haven't played their games in a while, but I was curious about their new things. This publisher makes modules based on the good old fantasy trip melee wizard system. And just like you had back in the day, you had paragraph-based adventures in which you will follow the story, you will make decisions and navigate a tree of text, like a choose your own adventure book, but then from time to time you would have combat, and combat is resolved on a hex-based map. The instructions tell you where you place your heroes, where you place the monsters, how the monsters are going to behave, and then you resolve that as a board game sequence. So it's a perfect hybrid between board gaming and paragraph-based adventures. Again, interactive fiction, role-playing game. It has a little bit of it has a little bit of all of those elements. It definitely is a form of gaming that is very narrative-based, but again, you also have the board-based element. So each module here comes with a booklet, with adventures, with several maps, and with counters that come in a single sheet, and you cut them and then you use them to represent heroes and monsters. I'm not going to show you the counters, so I'm not going to give you spoilers about the kind of terrors that you can expect. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about this module here, which is the last one that came out, Terrors of the Night. It is also, as far as I know, the first module by Dark City Games to have not one story, but an anthology of 3 different stories. They're all fantasy stories, and they're all set in the city of Red Point, which you may know if you played other adventures by Dark Cities before, these sort of like retro modules. Red Point is a fairly generic fantasy city, actually. I don't know that I would be able to distinguish it from a lot of other fantasy cities that maybe you find in some fighting fantasy books. There is a thief's area, there is a wealthy area, there is a bazaar, market, sewers, because there is no respectable fantasy city whose sewers you cannot explore, and things like that. We have 3 fantasy adventures here. In all 3 cases, you can create your party of heroes. Again, you can play solo, you read the story, you control several heroes, you resolve the battles. It can be played cooperative, I guess, with one player reading out loud and then everybody else making the choices, everybody making the choices together, making decisions for your characters on the board. Generally speaking, this is just another fun, solid implementation of the system. The system has been around since the 70s. Now it feels retro, but not dated. It's a simple system, move and attack and roll and add modifiers. It's a simple system. It's very straightforward. It is old school, but it works. It still works. It doesn't really... I don't feel like, oh, I wish it was different. But on the other hand, again, if you're playing modules that have been designed to bring you back to the melee wizard fantasy trip system, then you accept that old school feel. More specifically for these adventures, I'll give you the premise of all 3 and some general opinions that, in my humble opinion, do not constitute spoilers. And I hope I'm correct. If you really fear there's going to be spoilers, then please stop watching now. But I'm doing my best. Now, the first adventure, again, the premises. So I'm going to tell you what happens at the beginning of each, which I don't think it's a spoiler. You can't really begin the story if you don't know that. In the first of the 3 adventures, the most classic of all fantasy missions, you gotta capture an evil wizard. There's a bounty on the wizard's head, and so you're gonna look around for Red Point and see if you can find the wizard. And other bad stuff maybe happens because the wizard may have triggered things. It's not a bad adventure. I don't know why it felt a little short and it felt a little abstract, a little formulaic, sort of like I more or less knew even before where I started, where probably things were gonna be. And I just felt going through a couple of passages, oh, you find this person who wants that thing and find that item and you find that piece of information. It just felt a little bland. The second adventure, you're looking for a missing person, and either I was incredibly lucky and maybe I just found the one true way immediately, like every decision, every path in the way, I took the right one, but it felt super short. I was able to complete it in no time. Almost like, wait a second, this can be right. This cannot be over already, but it was. The third adventure is the one that I like the most. The one that really gave me finally a sense of immersion that I found it was lacking in the structure of the first one, and the second just didn't have enough. There wasn't enough material there to give you that sense. It's long or longer than the other ones. It has more detail. It has more flavor. It is written in a more evocative way. And you just get really the feeling you go to a certain area and there are 5, 6 possible places that you can visit. You have a sense of fullness, of richness, of really being able to navigate the city. Now, there aren't many of these nodes where you have, say, 5, 6 places you can visit the inn, or this place, or this place, or this place, or go somewhere else, or go to that area of the city. And when you go there, then there is another nice menu of options. But I got that sense of really exploring, interacting with a range of different characters. There was variety, there was combat, but in particular, really there were interesting interactions. Mind you, it's not a psychological novel, so the characters will act well in character. There's definitely a certain element of typecasting. If you find a certain representative of certain class, well, the character will act more or less like you expect from those fantasy tropes. But again, that's why you're reading a Wizard Melee module and not a novel by Henry James, for example. So when you get past that, the things feel a little stereotypical. However, in the third adventure, again, the stereotypical behavior of the characters somewhat is part of a construction that is still very entertaining and that I really enjoyed actually exploring and interacting with. So, Terrors of the Night. I don't know that I particularly like this formula of 3 adventures. I think I much prefer the ones where we have one long story so that you really are able to lose yourself into that story. You have time to explore. And really get a sense for the place, for the story, for the characters, etc., etc. With the exception of the last story, which I really liked, the previous 2 felt a little bit rushed, but the last one may just be interesting enough to be worth the price of admission. So Terrors of the Night, I think, is a solid implementation of the system in the sense of how the game system is brought to life here. But as for the execution of the stories, as I said, is a little bit of a mixed bag. The third story, really enjoyable. The other ones, a little weaker.